Today I'm going to explain the 8 most underrated quirks in My Hero Academia. Now for those of you who are unsure, an underrated quirk is one that people generally don't appreciate just how powerful or useful it actually is. So I'll go through the list and then at the end of it I'll do my ranking of the 3 best, and you guys can let me know which you consider to be the 3 best as well. But the actual list of these 8 quirks itself will not be listed in order. And with that said, let's get into the video. Okay, so starting in 8th place, we have the quirk known as Earthflow, which is possessed by the pro hero Pixie Bob. Now we first saw this quirk during the forest training arc in season 3, and at its full potential, no one can deny that this is one of the best quirks around. In fact, it was so good that Horikoshi decided to immediately have her taken out by surprise before she had a chance to use it against the villains. This guy knew what he was doing. So Earthflow allows the user to manipulate the ground in whatever way they choose, as long as they make contact with it. As we saw, Pixie Bob can create avalanches at will, as well as having this pretty interesting second ability, which enables her to conjure up these demons made from the soil, and she can control them from a distance, and while they do look pretty menacing, Class 1A was able to take them out pretty easily. Even Mineta's sticky balls were able to get in on the action. However, putting that aside, the ability to alter the ground in this way is very similar to the way that Overhaul applied his power, and in theory, Pixie Bob is also able to create spikes in the same way that he did, and also to rearrange the terrain and surrounding area in much the same way that he did as well. And like I said, that's why she was taken out so quickly once the villains attacked, because if she was active, then she could have just opened up the earth and buried these guys alive, or maybe just caused the ground underneath them to send them flying into the sky, kind of like this. Now in the Ultra Analysis book, her power and technique is rated a very impressive 5 out of 6, but in terms of the recognition that she gets, I personally feel that we as fans do not appreciate her level of power and this awesome quirk. Hopefully now she gets a bit more respect on her name. Now next up on the list, we have a tie at 7th place, because I consider both these powers to be 2 sides of the same coin. So firstly we have the quirk known as Impact Recoil, which was stolen by All For One. Because this guy just has so many quirks and he often combines them, it becomes very easy to forget that he has some really great individual abilities. Now this quirk is arguably one of the best powers he's gained, as it reverses the impact of any physical force that he takes. As an example, when he was fighting All Might, he got hit with the classic Detroit Smash, or rather he made Gran Torino get hit with it. And once he activated this quirk, the strength of that attack was then redirected back onto All Might. This meant that his own attack was used against him. Impact Recoil is so great because it almost acts as a deterrent to getting attacked. Sort of like the real life concept of mutually assured destruction, where countries that have nuclear weapons typically don't nuke each other as they know that the same thing will happen back to them. However, admittedly, it does have a few drawbacks. As we saw during the battle at Kamino, Impact Recoil takes a second to activate, which means that the person getting hit will still feel the pain and the initial impact before the quirk kicks in. But despite that, I still consider it to be pretty fantastic, and it deserves a little bit of spotlight here and there. Now the reason I tied it for 7th place is because there's another quirk which is almost like the inverse of this, and the power I'm referring to is possessed by a Class 1B student, Nirengeki. So rather than reversing the impact of something, like All For One's quirk, Nirengeki's quirk enables him to cause a second impact that is significantly stronger than the first. And what makes this quirk so amazing is that he can activate it from a distance. So for example, let's just say that the impact we're talking about here is you dropping your phone on the ground. This guy could then use his quirk to remotely create a second impact that would probably shatter your phone into a million pieces. What a dick. This ability to remotely create a second impact is pretty damn impressive, and no offense to Nirengeki, but it is basically the ultimate sidekick quirk. Still though, underrated. Now moving on to 6th place, we have the quirk known as Compress, which is obviously possessed by none other than Mr. Compress. Very creative naming process there. Those of you who follow me on Twitter might have seen that I said that Mr. Compress is my favourite League of Villain member right now. Not only is his power criminally underrated, but you also can't deny that he puts on a good show. A fight between these two is honestly what I need to see before the series ends. But talking about his quirk specifically, Compress allows him to shrink down anything into a marble, whether that be a living person or a part of a living person or a soon to be dead person, or you know, just cars and stuff. Once he's compressed something, the weight of that thing that he's compressed is significantly reduced, meaning that he can transport heavy objects without much trouble at all. Why he hasn't started a house moving service, I have no idea. We've seen Compress use this quirk in a variety of ways, and when it's combined with his illusionist nature, he's able to sneak up on people and capture them by surprise. The fight is literally over the second he turns someone into a marble, because the trapped person has no way of escaping. I mean, just look at Bakugo when he was trapped inside this thing, absolutely raging. Compress himself is insanely clever in the way that he uses this. For example, like when he made dummy marbles full of Todoroki's ice, and the fact that it allows you to reduce the weight of heavy items, that's almost like a quirk in itself, to be honest. Sadly though, Mr. Compress's use of this ability has been somewhat held back after Overhaul blew up his arm, so for the time being, it's just his right arm that is underrated. At 5th place, we have the quirk known as HELLFLAME, which is possessed by the new #1 hero, Endeavour. Now I know what you're thinking, how could the character currently ranked #1 in the hero rankings be underrated? As I kind of implied in the intro, an underrated quirk doesn't have to be one that people think is bad, but rather it can be something that we just don't appreciate how strong it really is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a few examples of how Endeavour has used this quirk that hasn't yet been seen in the anime, but I won't give away any plot twists or plot spoilers. That said, if you really don't want to know, skip to the timestamp on screen if you want to go to the next character. But for those of you who want to hear about the greatness that is HELLFLAME, let's get into it. So first things first, there was a moment in the manga that genuinely made me sit back and rub my eyes in disbelief. If you've not read it, this is going to be insane to hear. Endeavour used this quirk to incinerate the top half of a skyscraper. In the words of the other heroes who witnessed it, that is a godlike move. How the hell do you burn the top half of one of those things? How do you burn it to dust in an instant? And on top of that, his quirk essentially gives him the power of flight, as we see in this panel where he shoots off into the sky like Johnny Storm. Give this man and his quirk the respect that he deserves. His Prominence Burn move is so strong that it is able to defeat villains who have super regeneration. Think about how powerful you need to be to destroy something that would ordinarily just regenerate in a few seconds. I could go on, as Endeavour has a lot of different techniques that he showed us, including that moment in the anime where his flames went blue for a split second, but I'll just summarize it by saying this. HELLFLAME was definitely a quirk that I myself underestimated, so this video right here, this is my apology to Endeavour. I'm actually sorry man, please do not kill me. Now at 4th place, we have the quirk known as Mushroom, which is held by Class B student Kinoko. She can create these spores of fungus from her body, which then quickly grow into full-size mushrooms once they make contact with a solid surface. This allows her to completely change the environment in an instant, but the slight drawback is that if it's not a humid environment, the spores don't travel very well. Hence why she walks around with 2 humidifiers that are definitely not shaped like pistols. Now I'm going to be honest with you guys here. This is probably the worst quirk on this list, but I did include it because there was one thing that she's able to do with this quirk that made a lasting impression on me. I won't go into any spoilers on who she did this to, but using her mushroom quirk, she's able to choose to create mushrooms inside her opponent's throat and lungs. So that means that by using this technique, you can literally suffocate your opponent to death. Not implying that she would do that or anything, I mean look at her. But joking aside, you can definitely tell she wants to. A quirk that has the potential to suffocate people in a way that 99% of characters will not be able to fight against, to me that's a winning quirk in my book, or at least one that we should acknowledge. And for that reason, that is why Kinoko has a place on this list. Before we move on to 3rd place, don't forget to sub to the channel if you haven't already, as I'm trying to reach 50,000 subscribers by the end of March. Thanks guys. Now in 3rd, we have the quirk known as Object Gigantification. Now the name of this one is pretty self-explanatory, but it allows the user to gigantify any object that they touch. We saw this demonstrated by a student from Sejin High School, I think I said that right, and using this ability, this guy was able to turn a handful of nuts and bolts into weapons of mass destruction. And this, my friends, is the reason I love this quirk. Ordinary items become things that can crush villains or reshape your environment. Imagine you're trapped somewhere, right? Let's just say, for example, that you're trapped inside a cave. Now, all you would need is like a bunch of coins or something, and if you chucked it at the wall and gigantified it, you'd be out of that cave in 2 seconds. Well, that's if the falling rocks don't kill you, I guess. Which brings us to the main downside of this quirk, which is that it's super easy to cause unintended destruction with something like this, which is kind of a problem that Mount Lady has also experienced. Still though, in my opinion, this power deserves way more recognition, and although it might cause a lot of damage, it would still be good for taking out very powerful villains. Now next up, we have Nejire's quirk, which is called Wave Motion. Now, not only is Nejire's quirk underrated, but out of all the big 3 members, Nejire has had by far the least amount of spotlight. Come on Horikoshi, we need an origin story. You owe us that much at least. At its most basic form, Wave motion allows her to convert her stamina into these massive shockwaves. Now, these shockwaves can't be released in a straight line, and instead they come out as a spiral. And this twisting motion is naturally slower than quirks that just shoot things out in a straight line. But as we've seen, Nejire has reached such a level of power where speed isn't even an issue anymore. The fact that they twist like this also ties into her first name, which literally means to twist. Because her quirk drains her energy to be used, she has to build up an incredible amount of stamina to avoid the negative side effects. Her stamina is so great that she was able to carry on for 20 minutes after being drained by Katsukame's stamina stealing quirk. Wave motion isn't just limited to her hands either, as we see that she creates these little shockwaves out of the soles of her feet, which gives her the propulsion she needs to fly, or just to hover casually in the air. Even the tiny waves are capable of holding up an entire human being, guys. So yeah, these waves are not to be played with. But with all that said, we finally got into the last character on this list, and after I tell you who this is, we're going to then do a ranking of the top 3. So the last quirk on this list is Double, which is a quirk possessed by Twice. Double allows him to create an exact copy of anything, whether it's a living person or an inanimate object. The copies he makes of living people are capable of their own independent thought, and he can't actually control them. In order to duplicate something, he needs to know the exact measurements and characteristics of it, and we've seen in the manga that he's not been able to copy a certain because he didn't know exactly what it was made of. Now, Twice can make a maximum of 2 copies of one thing at a specific time, and both of these clones are not as durable as the real thing. So for example, if he makes 2 clones of a person, the first clone would be able to be destroyed if they suffer damage equal to breaking a bone, and the second clone would be even weaker than that. That said, the clones still possess the exact same power as the real versions, which is what makes Double one of the most annoying quirks to ever exist. How many times in the anime and manga, and even the movies, have the heroes fought very, very hard against villains, managed to defeat them or capture them, only to find out that they weren't even real? You literally don't know who you're fighting against until you've won the battle. Now, Twice has a secret move that's only ever been seen in the manga, so before I mention that, skip to the timestamp on screen if you want to see the quirks that I rank in my top 3, but if you don't mind the spoilers from the My Villain Academia arc, then let's get into it. In that arc, Twice was able to use his super move called Infinite Doubles. Now, Infinite Doubles allows him to create a copy of himself, and then those clones, because they have his exact power, they're then able to create copies of themselves, who then create copies of themselves, and so on and so on. The process is repeated over and over until you just have an ocean of Twice clones. And the reason this quirk is underrated is because a lot of people do not even know that he can do this. We saw Twice copy himself in the anime, and then his clones went on a rampage and killed each other, hence why he only clones other people. But once he overcame his trauma in the manga, he was able to unlock this Infinite Doubles ability, and to be honest, with this quirk, who would stop him from taking over the world? Like, if he made 10 billion Twice clones, who's gonna stop him? Who? We've reached the end of this list, so with all that said, let's get into the best 3 underrated quirks. So the bronze medal goes to Compress due to the large variety of ways that it can be taken advantage of, and the silver medal goes to Hellflame because of its sheer power, and again, we've seen Endeavour use this in a multitude of different ways that serve a lot of different goals. But my friends, the gold medal, the best underrated quirk that exists in My Hero Academia, is Double. This is a quirk that even characters in the show admit has the power to take down entire countries. Also, it's pretty interesting that he's never replicated All For One, at least as far as we know. What if the All For One we saw at Kamino was a clone the whole time? Could you imagine that? This guy is a thorn in the side of hero society, and as long as he's around, the heroes are really up against it. Even Hawk said that this guy is the one we need to watch out for from the League of Villains. But let me know in the comments, which ones do you rank in your top 3? Thanks for watching as always, and I'll be seeing you soon for a discussion video that I did with one of my fellow favorite YouTubers. But until I upload that, peace out.